Thank you very much, Rachna. Invited guests, it is just truly an honor to be here today to participate in the introduction of a first ever race-based data legislation in the country. I want to thank all of you, particularly Parliamentary Secretary Singh, for all of the work that went into preparing to bring forward this legislation. And it is with a significant amount of pride that I know Minister Eby will stand in a few short minutes and be recognized by the first ever South Asian speaker in the legislature of British Columbia to introduce that legislation. And when he does so, he will be surrounded by the largest collection of non-Caucasian members that have ever sat in the BC legislature. Members of Chinese descent, members of South Asian descent, Filipino descent, LGBTQ, Indigenous descent, all of that, the first time ever, the largest group ever to be collected in a legislature, bringing forward legislation that is indeed long overdue, but process matters. And Dr. Francis, your remarks were inspiring, as they always are, and it makes it extremely difficult to follow. But, and I know that there will be questions later on, and process will be indeed part of that, but it is important. It's the creation of the legislation that I'm most proud of. Parliamentary Secretary Singh went out into the community and said, how do we create legislation that will work for you? As Dr. Francis said, for too long, racialized communities have been said, prove that. How do you know that? And the answer was, you have the information, why don't you look at it? Better yet, why don't you share that information with all British Columbians so that we can build the inclusive, diverse society that all of us talk about when we celebrate our multicultural heritage. I always say that I'm the son of an Irish immigrant, but it's got to be more than where you came from. It's what can we do tomorrow to make this dynamic, diverse, multicultural community also an anti-racist community. Working with Regional Chief TG and Robert Phillip from the First Nations Summit, and indeed all of the Leadership Council, as bringing forward the Declaration Act, again, a first in North America. Now that we're a couple of years into it, of course, through a global pandemic, we're working on the action plan to deliver on the promise of the legislation. But again, as I look at this first steps when it comes to race-based data, I can look with some pride to the work that we have done with Indigenous communities, with government officials across the board to build a work plan so that the Declaration does have more than just the promise of introduction, but the reality of an equitable society with First Peoples at the foundation, not at the periphery. It is truly inspiring to be in a caucus that is more than 50% women. I was raised by a single mom and my sister, who I rarely give credit to, but those were the two most important women in my life until my wife came along and made the other two less important. But I always tell Ellie that when I'm going to work, I'm going into a room full of women who are from different backgrounds, different experiences, that help shape the government policies that all of us want to see today. And this legislation was put together predominantly by women, Rachna and Dr. Francis among them, but many of the women that are sitting and I'm looking at today were key participants in the creation of this legislation, and we're so proud of that. This is just the first step on the road to building the anti-racist British Columbia we all want to see. But, as we all know from people more famous than me, with each journey you have to take that first step. And this has been a challenging step. We are now coming up to the 5th year since the swearing in of my government. And from day one, the direction to all ministers and all members of the government caucus was to build out the province we all wanted to live in. One that was inclusive, one that reflected the diversity that we represent outside of this building that was built for other purposes by other people a long, long time ago. But today, is the first step on that journey to reclaim this building, not just for those who sit in the legislature, but all of those in British Columbia who are represented by a diverse, dynamic group of people, opposition and government, that come here to make life better. And the accountability that will be within this act will be a result of the advocacy that's sitting in front of me. Never stop the advocacy, and we'll never stop the accountability. Lastly, because I know that we're all anxious to get on to the genuine celebration of being together and going into the legislature and preparing for the Speaker, Raj Chauhan, to recognize the Attorney General, who will stand and continue to stand to deliver the legislation. I want you all to know and acknowledge in your hearts that without you, this would not be happening. Without the countless people who came before you, this would not be happening. Without those who came before Rachna and I and Raj and Ravi and David, without those who built the foundation, we would not be on the precipice of the glory and the greatness that we want for this province. Inclusive, diverse, dynamic, and ready to take on any challenges at any time, together, arm in arm, men and women, people of color and non-people of color, working together, striving for the community that we all have in our hearts. What a great way to spend our day, huh? Hallelujah. Hi,